So my aim today is to show you how you can build modern applications in Power Apps using nothing but your microphone and a text user interface. So this changes the way you think about modern app development. It's definitely frontier, but if we look at the application I have on screen right now, I've built a web app in the form of a learning platform for Copilot and agents. And there's learning about Microsoft 365 Copilot, for instance, but also things like flashcards, so you can learn about particular keywords like what is a prompt. And of course, challenges, and each of those challenges have different levels, different questions, different styles of questions, and then depending on how quickly you answer them, you pick up various points, and of course, then you appear on a leaderboard. Now, if you imagine the amount of time that would take you to build in a Power App, I'm going to show you how you can build it using something called a squad. So over on Power Apps, I have an example of a code app. It's Connect 4, and if I play that application, I can play against a computer, and I have a lovely interface for Connect 4. Now, you might be thinking it's not using AI to play the next move, correct? I never went that far, but remember today's demonstration is about how modern app development is changing, how your pro coders might start to build in the low code space using those guardrails of the Power Platform and build a code app using these modern techniques. So I'm also going to share something called the Squad Framework, something that Brad has developed here at Microsoft with his colleagues, and it allows you to scale up development using a multi-agent infrastructure. Now you'll have seen multi-agent within Copilot Studio. This is multi-agent with my text user interface, which we'll see shortly. Now, key to this also is documentation, because of course we need to make sure that our agent and our build process is grounded. And of course, this is completely unedited. I'm going to give this a go, build out that same application that we saw, this learning platform that I built here, and we'll build it in such a way that it will use Dataverse. So if you don't want to do a Copilot learning platform and you want to do something around your internal processes and gamify how people learn about your organization, then you can build out this type of application with a data framework that you can then populate either using your questions and answers or potentially using AI to generate those answers at scale, but using your grounded information. So if I bring up my terminal window side by side, you'll see I'm in a folder called AI Projects. I told you I'm going to do everything without my hands. This is probably the last bit. I just want to make sure that I've created a directory for this new application. So this is going to be Learn with Code Apps. That creates a new directory. I can then navigate to that directory. You can see I've been playing a lot with Learn as a folder name. I now have a new folder name. And what I need to do is I need to bring down this squad framework into this folder so I can start using this concept. So you can see with the instructions, they've already got a make directory and then into the folder, and they do a git initialize. So I'll do a git ini on this folder. That initializes a repo, and then I need to install and initialize this squad. So I can paste into the terminal window here. This is actually downloading files into a folder on my PC, and then it'll run the second command, which is to initialize the squad. We'll run that there, and that is my squad up and running. Now, because I've used this terminal in the past, I've already gone through the GitHub authentication so that I'm already logged in, but I do need to open up Copilot to get things running. So we have this command here. Because I'm using the PowerShell terminal, I've got a command GH to add, and then Copilot or -agent squad -YOLO. But if we run that, that'll launch the terminal interface. And now I'm going to step away from the keyboard and start using my microphone. So I'm going to say that I trust this folder, and now we're ready to get building. So first up, Shift and Tab. I do need my keyboard for this, but you'll see at the bottom here, I'm shifting through different modes. And at the moment I'm in autopilot, which will mean the agent will go away and start building straight away. But if I keep shifting into the plan mode, then I can have a conversation back and forth and decide what I'm going to build, what I'm going to build with, how I'm going to build. You'll also note that I've got some MCP servers enabled as well. And if I use the command MCP, we can see that I have a couple of MCPs, of which one of them is Microsoft Learn. And of course, that's a trusted resource for me. There is an official MCP for Learn, and that means the agent can go and refer to those materials that are on that website if it needs to. So to get things started, what I'm going to use is my Windows H key and start describing the process of building out an application. Hi there, my plan today is to build out a code app in Power Apps. Now I can provide you with an initial link to the documentation, but I want you to use the Microsoft Learn MCP. Now this particular code app I want to discuss with you and the team, which we've not yet formulated, an application that will gamify learning. I really want to have some initial learning stages where people can generally learn about a particular product or process or something like that. And then I want to move on more generally to some flashcards with some keywords where they can move those flashcards and flip them over and check the keywords versus the descriptions. And then I want to move on to challenges, and those challenges will be based on particular types of questions like true and false, or maybe choose from the following question and 4 answers, choose the correct answer, or potentially fill in the blank using a drop down with possible options. So I want to keep things flexible, but at the same time, I do also need a scoreboard. This all needs to be connected to Dataverse, and I want this to be structured in a way that the application can have data loaded into it for those different question types. So think carefully about the schema that's going to be behind the scenes to enable me to bulk load data after the application has been built and deployed. Hit enter. Wow, that was a lot of information. Now, if you imagine doing this with a member of staff working in a project team, you've got a front-end developer, a back-end developer. Now, this is what's happening now. I've installed the Squad framework, and the initial agent is picking up my description. And as we watch on screen, if I move this microphone out of the way, the agent is discussing what I've just proposed and thinking about the best way to approach it. And what will happen is we're currently entering into a planning phase. So there'll be loads of questions, things like the Dataverse schema, where to get the information about code apps, how we're going to deploy it. And right now, it's thinking about those different developers or different personas, job types that we'll need. So all the grey stuff that we see, that is a thought process of the agent. And shortly, it's going to come back with some white text, which I know then is the actual summary from the language model, and it will tell me what it thinks we should do next. So here we go. Squad source is here. I can see the repo is set up. Here's what I've learned from your app. And then for the Power Apps, Code App, React, and Dataverse, I'd cast from the matrix. It's literally about learning, training, and seeing through constructs. So there we go. For those that love the Matrix film, it's already chosen a theme for the names of my different employees in this process. And does it look right? I have the option of using my keyboard. I know I said I wouldn't use my keyboard. I will a little bit. And I can move up and down using the cursor keys. But yes, let's hire this team. So the agent is going away and now building out that squad structure. It'll be defining those job descriptions based on what I've discussed previously. And you can imagine there's a lot happening right now with all the different language models. It's firing up different language models, creating files. And maybe that's something that'd be interesting to see. It's not something I necessarily watch during the build. But if I bring across VS Code here, we can see I've opened up the folder, Learn with Code Apps. Everything that's green means it's been newly created. And lots of updates happening here. I've got a little tool installed or extension that allows me to follow any changes. So as the agent starts making changes to files, what we'll see here within VS Code is along the top with the tabs, new tabs will open. And there we go. So these are some of the things that are happening right now. The agent is writing new markdown files to define how our squad will work. So looking in at the thinking process, the team is hired. We can now use the code apps requirement skill. And I'm about to be asked about how Morpheus and the team should shape the plan. So will it be text-only descriptions, bullet points and key concepts? Will there be any images or screenshots? Or indeed, will there be any embedded video? Now, I'm going to keep things simple, but it really demonstrates that you can go through this thought process and discuss your your plan in a lot more detail. Let's keep it as text only for now, and I'll hit enter. I've also noticed that I haven't sent the last bit of the dictation. So let's again have a look at this. It's saying, got it, more questions. Is this an individual progress tracker or a competitive leaderboard? Hey, let's go for a competitive leaderboard because I want people to see other folks' progress through these learning paths and create that competitive nature. Does the app cover one topic at a time, or should users be able to choose from multiple topics? Well, we've got multiple learning paths, multiple topics, or categories with subtopics. I'm going to mix things up here and say, I would like to have 3 levels, a basic, a medium, and an advanced, so that people can progress. And if they've completed, say, 80% or more of each of those levels, they then can progress to the next level, accumulating their points as they move through the learning. And you can see that's all been captured. I can send that off to the agent. And at the same time, what I was going to mention is at the bottom where I've said, think about the schema, that's still sitting there in my text box. I haven't sent it. So you can stack these requests as you go along. And whilst the agent is coming back to me and telling me it's able to do this, what's we got here? One more, and this time, is the app focused on one subject or should it support multiple subjects? One subject. Oh, right. Yes, let's go for multiple topics. So what's being proposed here by the agent is actually thinking way ahead here is, could this app actually support multiple different learning paths? So maybe a learning path on Power Apps, a learning path on Power Automate, or maybe different learning paths for onboarding if you had like HR requirements, or maybe health and safety requirements, and you had different learning paths. So this is really making an application that could potentially be quite scalable, and you could use it for multiple reasons with your employees. Data loading. How should content get into the system? Should there be an admin interface? Let's just say we'll make it Dataverse Direct for now, because I don't want to overcomplicate even more this first version of our application. But what I keep mentioning, I keep failing to do, we've got this point here about the schema. I'm going to hit enter. You can see that's pending. And once the agent is finished thinking, that additional context will be sent to the agent, and it'll also consider that too. So I've asked it to think carefully about the Dataverse schema, what it will support in terms of bulk data loading. We've got some more questions coming by the looks of it, even though I've said just previously that I want to load data directly into Dataverse. So let's see what the agent thinks of. Now remember, this is like you speaking to your main architect, someone like myself, looking at the bigger picture. You initially gather a high-level design, and then you go back and forth with that conversation, gathering user requirements in order to understand what the different processes are for their application and what they're trying to achieve. And here's our next question. For the 80% pass threshold to unlock the next level, what counts towards that score? Is it the question, or do learning stages and flashcards also contribute? Now I'm going to say only challenges. So there's the initial learning flashcards, depending on your learning style, and then you go on to the next point. Are the points the same for each? Now, it's given an example of basic, medium, advanced. Let's try. I would like the same level of points per question, but if you get it wrong, or if we can have a timer or something like that so that you can gain bonus points but equally lose points for each of those questions, let's build something like that into it also. It makes it a bit more fun and gamified, and then we know that everyone's not all going to get to the top score because there'll be variations. So again, I send off that thought. This is very much me going through that planning process. And all we're doing at this point, really just hiring our team and then discussing the plan. So for multiple choice, will there always be 4 options? Yeah, let's go with that. We'll go with the first answer. Still doing the research, still creating the plan. Bulk loading. When you load the questions, would you prefer the answers as separate rows or as flat columns? Ooh, separate table, 1 row per answer, most flexible. Yes, I agree. Let's go with that. So again, just thinking about the entity relationship diagram, these are the things that if you were new to building applications, you might be thinking about putting everything into a list. You might have it really broad with all the different columns in a single list. This is really thinking about how to architect all of those tables and how to store the data that relates to both the playback of the quiz, but also potentially creating the leaderboard and such like. So again, a lot of thought process going in. We've now got everything. Excellent. I've got everything I need. Let me get Morpheus and Trinity to design the schema. Then we'll create the full plan. So this is where I kind of step back shortly and I will be able to go and grab myself a cup of tea, and we'll then hopefully come back to the first version. So whilst the agent has got access to Microsoft Learn MCP, I'm just wondering as well if I'll maybe give it a little heads up with some official documentation by copying some links here and just say, I'm going to provide you with some official links that I want you to look at, because there is some information about how to get started, but also how to connect to Dataverse. I'm also wondering if you can create the Dataverse tables for me. And for that, I'm actually going to propose that we set up the Dataverse MCP. And then that way you can create the tables and also potentially populate the data. So here are some extra links for you to consider. And bear in mind that I want to use MCP for creating those tables and also the sample data. So I'm just pasting in some of those links here into the chat, as you can see, and that will enable it to scrape those links and keep them as references, as well as being able to refer back to our Microsoft Learn. And here is how to connect to Dataverse MCP. There's actually going to be an endpoint that will allow us to create records, list tables, etc. And this, again, is the modern way of building out applications. So I'll send that across. The agent is currently thinking, and once it's finished its thinking process, it'll pick up that information and add it to its plan. So we can see the agent going through the process of fetching each of those document links that are provided. Again, everything in grey is what the agent is thinking and planning, and then anything in white that comes back is an instruction for me. So let's get Morpheus and Trinity's schema designs. We can see some reading of various files happening, which are over in our project folder that the agents have created in order to develop that strategy for building out our application. And because we've got these different personas, you can see the discussion that's going on here and making sure that those things match. So Morpheus has got one idea, however Trinity has got a simpler approach. So the overall project lead for this is making some decisions and firming out our design so that they have a clear path to build out our application. I also find it quite fascinating to see things like limitations, things that I talk about when building out apps and automations. In the documentation, there's always a known limitation section, and the agent has noticed the important limitations from Code Apps documentation. Alternate keys aren't supported, but that doesn't affect this app because we use standard GUID lookups. So it's incredible to think that the agent has gone away, read that official documentation, and it's very important to emphasize the importance of grounding, because by grounding our agent on that official documentation, it's able to make informed decisions about the best steps forward rather than a general web search or hallucinating and making things up from memory, which of course could be out of date. So we're now getting some to-do items. We're getting some dependencies as well. The plan is assembled, and shortly our agents are going to go and get to work and build us a solution. So this is our plan. Learn with Code Apps. It's a gamified learning code app. There's going to be a schema of 10 Dataverse tables, including all those different things that I discussed, like the flashcards and questions and answer options. And then there are going to be different levels. There's going to be answer options, a leaderboard. We're going to use Dataverse MCP to build all the tables and to seed some Power Apps basic dataset questions. And that's purely so that I can very quickly demonstrate the app with some live data. Now remember, because this is going to have a Dataverse backend, you can populate it using Power Automate or data flows or a custom Copilot Studio agent that can write to Dataverse, and you can get your question and answers into your application using this framework. So there are 6 phases of this. There's a foundation, a scaffold, the user interface, the logic, deploying it, and then writing out the docs for our admin. And these are the sort of steps you do as a real team. If you worked for a partner, you'd have a project lead, you'd have all these different personas, but now we've got them as agents with job descriptions, with a plan, with issues, things that they're going to build in each of those phases. So I could at this point go and contest what's been agreed. I could add additional requirements, but I'm going to proceed with accepting the plan, hitting the enter key. I did touch the keyboard. I promise not to touch it, but there will be small elements where I will. We've got another question here for tracking the learner. Should we use the built-in contact table? I mean, these again are things that if you are a developer, you know exist. You might want your own. You might want to use the synced contacts. Let's go with the contacts because it's integrated with Entra. What else have we got here? We've also got an optional hint field on flashcards, a clue shown before the user flips the card. Yes, add a hint. No, keep it simple. Let's just say, keep it simple. And again, this is where I get to influence the design of the application. I know the process and I'm using the AI to design this and plan it with me. So how long should the timer be per question? Whoa. Let's go for a friendly 45 seconds. I quite like that option. I could, of course, said that once you go beyond 45 seconds, you can't score any points. I could give a bit more detail. There is still some uncertainty there, but we'll go with this first version. Should the questions be in random order? Yep, let's go for random so that there's no easy way to learn what's coming next. And I can see that the agent is thinking that I had asked to set up MCP. To get the Dataverse MCP, we need two things, an admin step, which I actually know I've already done. So if I come across here into the documentation, it does say, I think further down here, there are prerequisites, a Power Platform admin role, and you need to configure it via the Power Platform Admin Center. I've actually already gone through this, but I do need to go and get the MCP endpoint, which I can get by going to aka.ms/PPAC. So meanwhile, I can say to the agent, yes, I have admin access. I have already enabled it. You can, of course, refer to the documentation. But if I go into manage and go into my personal, because that's where I'm looking to build this, there is a URL, which I can right click and copy. And it's asking me for that URL. I'm almost preempting what it's going to ask. So I know this process. And if I give it that URL, it's actually going to add /API/MCP. And that will allow it then to talk to the MCP server because I'm already authenticated using the Power Platform Admin Center extension that's installed. So it says it's added. It does say I'll need to restart it for it to become available. And then they'll have access to the tools. So I've enabled it admin. I'm ready to restart. Let's go with this. And will it talk me through how to restart the conversation? Or will it crack on? So it's summarized what's next. It's asking me to restart and then come back. So if I use my keyboard, Control-C and Control-C again, that exits. And then you'll see that in order for me to resume where I left off, I can run this. So I need to prefix with GH. I can paste in that resume and the ID of the conversation. That brings me back in. And we will hopefully have that additional MCP server this time round. I've got a login here, which presumably relates to my MCP. I can also see I now have 3 MCP servers loaded. And in theory, if I go back into plan mode and just say, right, that's me done a restart, can you get things started and build as we've agreed? And don't forget to use my squad. Definitely don't forget to use my squad. The agent in charge should have a think about what I've just asked, and it should pick up where we left off, fire up the squad, the different personas that I've used through that framework that I installed through Brad's repo. It needs to know who my username is for Git. It just so happens I've already previously authenticated with Git as well, GitHub. That's all done. I'm happy with it to use list tables and don't ask again. The other thing I'm going to do is do a /YOLO, which means it's now got the ability to do anything at once. You only live once for those that are slightly older or maybe the same age as me. And not down with the cool kids. So YOLO, you only live once. That means it can go away and do as it pleases, but shortly it will get to work and start building out that schema, start building out the app and working through the plan that I've discussed. So there we go. Trinity is going to be creating all the Dataverse tables. Neo is going to scaffold the app, and then Scribe is logging all the progress so that we have that ability to create documentation afterwards. So that's things kicked off. Now, it's sometimes quite interesting just to watch in VS Code what's happening, the files that are being created by our agent. It looks like it's creating, or downloading at least, an SVG image. But because I have this little extension installed down the bottom of my VS Code, it's currently following or tracking any changes in that folder. And as new files are being created, it's opening them up here along the top. And that would enable me as a developer to keep an eye on what my coding team are currently building. And I might want to do a code review, for instance, and ensure that what's been put together is ready for production. Now I note that at the moment our agent is actually creating tables. So if I jump across into Power Apps and have a look at all tables, I should be able to look for one that's called Topic. And there we have that exact table, the CR24B topic table, which is being created as we speak. And I'll keep that open there in case we need to return back to it later. But at the same time, look, we can see we're getting some error messages. And what should happen is our agent will work through these and try again and try and fix these errors and get our application built for us. If I think back to the early days that I built any automations or apps, I was using batch scripts and PowerShell and writing a lot of PHP. I spent a lot of time searching the internet for answers, a lot of troubleshooting, and that's still very much a skill in this sense, in that there will be a lot of testing required ultimately when this application is built. But there's also thinking about that bigger picture, understanding the architecture, trying to go through that planning phase with your agent. The more planning you do, the better the outcome will be, and considering the bigger picture of where it's going to connect to, how the users are going to interface and use the application that you build. I've obviously left a lot of things still potentially open, and I can work through that in a future development, but in terms of achieving probably something that will be very good as a version 1, all I've done really is describe it to my agent. And again, thinking about years gone by when things like this failed and I was trying to make API calls and I couldn't get things to work, I'd spend many hours trying to work out how to get it work, probably having that moment at 3 a.m. in the morning and waking up and thinking, that's why it didn't work, and having to run back downstairs to my PC and plug in that extra parameter or make that change so that I could proceed on to the next stage of the development. Whereas now, the agent is solving everything for me in real time, but I can still learn. I can watch what's happening. I can see these tables being created. And if I have a follow-up question about what's happening right now, I can type into that terminal window, ask a question, and when it stops for a breather, it'll pick up that question and answer. And then I can learn and I can bring that into my next development. So I can see what's happened here. I did originally build a very, very basic quiz app in Canvas apps many years ago, and it looks like I have a question answer table already in Dataverse, ironically with the same name. So that's caused an issue. That's why we saw that red text. And the agent is currently thinking about it and saying, well, why don't we use distinct names for our app? Perfect. I mean, that's my fault. I've gone and used similar type app development ideas, but our agent has worked through it. And maybe in a future iteration when I'm planning, I might ask it to discuss with me the schema names for the different tables, and then I can ensure that they're using a particular solution prefix and all those things. So there's a lot to be learned as you watch this unfold, how you can get better, put these into an instructions file or a markdown file so that you remember them for next time. and you can ask the agent to do these things for you. You can reflect on a conversation and document the lessons learned and things that potentially I should have asked before we proceeded. Now, I'm very much learning as I go along in this process too, and one of the things that I will demonstrate now is asking the agent how best to perform, what the best practices might be in terms of the context window, because as we ask questions and the agent does more and more thinking, of course, there's more and more information in its memory and its context, and then it will start to hallucinate because it will compact some of that conversation and forget what we discussed earlier. The reason I'm using the squad framework is because each of those individual employees that we have that's creating tables or creating a backend or creating a front end or documenting, they have their own context windows, they have their own job descriptions. They're also maintaining a file behind the scenes of what they're learning. So they do have their own learning file, but this particular agent that's in control right now has a huge context of information. So this is how I learn. Hi there, obviously you've been going for quite a while right now, and I'm concerned about the size of the context window for you. So can you give me a recommendation as to when and how I should reset the context window, and then how I can make sure that the squad picks up on the next stage of the development? I really want to learn best practices as I start using this GitHub Copilot CLI. So I've sent that off to the agent. You'll see it's pending, and just like an employee, when they get the chance to respond to a message, they'll have a think about it. It's currently reasoning. You can see the grey text again. That's the agent having a think, and then it'll be able to come back to me with some suggestions based on what it's thought. So a great question. A perfect moment to checkpoint is once we've finished a phase. So I've been going for 15 to 20 turns. Multiple agents have been involved. Right now is ideal because the phase 1 of tables and scaffold is done, and we're going to move on to phase 2. So this is exactly what Squad is designed for. Memory lives in files like I've described, and when you start a fresh session, each agent reads their history and decisions before working. And this is why this, again, I can't emphasize why this concept of squads or having the sort of project team type setup is far more advanced than just using a single agent. So it's asked to commit everything, and Scribe will log, and then what I need to say in the next session is let's continue building the app, see the sample data and start building the screen. So I'm actually going to copy that into my clipboard. So we've got that, and then should we commit, log and checkpoint everything now? Yes, let's do that. This is also quite an interesting moment for me to bring across the VS Code, and we can see some of those changes happening. So the documentation is coming together there, the history of all those individual agents to understand what they've been working on and what the plan is when we pick things up again. So I can see that's it finished. I can now go and clear out that context window. And in fact, before I do clear it out, let's just have a look. If I type in context, we can see the amount of information that's currently in its context window, 78% full with various information. If I do that /clear and then bring up context again, you can now see that only 10% of that is full. And if I paste in, let's continue building the app and start building the screens, I'm always a bit nervous about it, deciding not to use the squad. So I'm going to say, make sure the squad is involved and hit enter. So just like what was described by the agent, it's going to go back through now. This is a brand new session. It's going to read through all that documentation, find out where we are, and hopefully pick up phase 2 of our development and start populating the data and moving on to the next stage. And there arrives my cat. Here is Eddie. He is a very big boy, and he's looking to go outside to catch some mice. So I'm going to let him outside whilst we wait for the agent to crack on. So we can see again the agent thinking in the grey text, and it knows that it's picking up the phase 2 to go and see the sample data and start building out screens using the squad. will create the plan for this next phase and then get the team to it. So that's the plan agreed. It's going to build out the data further and start then building out those different screens, some utilities that are needed as well for the scoring, and then it'll do some CSS cleanup. I'm going to, again, just accept what we've got here on the screen by hitting the enter key. You may also be thinking things like color schemes and the design of buttons, and are you using glass morphism or whatever. Then again, that's very much part of your planning process. So we are going to get something a bit creative here. It is going to design those color schemas. If I want them to be accessible, which of course I would want them to be because that's the way I design things. I'm an architect. As an end user, you might not think about these things, but these are very important design considerations. So whilst I try to demonstrate today how we're going to build an application, there's still far more questions that you can ask your agent as part of that planning phase. But equally, once this is all built, you can come back in a second phase of planning and say, look, we've got an application, but we overlooked X, Y, and Z. We want to improve the overall appearance of the application. And then using this similar squad framework, you can go through that discussion, go through that iteration, and improve your application. So if we jump back across into Power Apps, let's go have a look and see if I can find those tables. The challenge question table, I reckon, could well be the one that we're looking for. If I go and open that up and scroll down, at the moment there are no questions, but of course part of the challenge here for the agent is to create some dummy data for my initial version of the application. And so we should hopefully eventually see some questions go in here. And the other interesting thing just to highlight is these agents with different personas are actually working in parallel. So just like you'd have in a normal team scenario where you'd have that morning 15-minute stand-up, agree on a plan, and then everyone go off and do their own things. That's what's happening here. We're planning at the beginning of the day, albeit every 15 minutes, and then off go the squad. They go and do their work. If they've got any questions, they can consult with each other or consult back with the team lead and then continue with their current plan. I thought it was quite interesting at this point to bring over the current file that's been worked on, which is the seeding of data. So we can see some of the structured data that's going to go into our Dataverse table relating to the different stages, and potentially, if I scroll further down, flashcard information. So what is a model-driven app, a type of Power App, and Power App Studio, the browser-based design environment, PowerFX, a low-code formula language. So the agent is currently working on a file that contains all that data that will go into Dataverse, and then it will use MCP to load that data into our table for us, and hopefully we'll see some of that data arrive in our Power Apps table shortly. So I can see the agents have moved on now and have claimed to load data. I'm refreshing the screen here, not seeing any data. So let's use Shift and Tab to put it into plan mode. And then I'm going to ask the question, have you loaded data into Dataverse? Can you get me into or tell me the name of a table or table schema that I should check and how many records I should see? I'm just curious. I just want to look. You don't need to worry about it. And I'll send that off to the agent. Again, this is just demonstrating you how my thought process works, how I learn, and how I use AI to assist me with this process. I thought by looking in Power Apps, I'd be able to see the data in this challenge questions table, but at the moment there's no data. So either it hasn't loaded the data or I'm looking in the completely wrong table. And I've got an example of another table from another development. So let's see what it thinks of when it stops for a wee break and answers. So the agent has picked up my question finally, and it's telling me that it's created the seed data, but it's not loaded into Dataverse yet. So remember, this is the thinking. In a minute, we're going to get the white text, and that should summarize its thinking. But actually, I'm just ahead of the game. Maybe in the next phase, the data is going to be loaded. Let's see what it comes back with. So we can see the response now. Data has not been loaded. The tables are empty. We've got some seed data, and these are the number of expected records to be created. The seeding is planned in phase 3. So the aim of the game there is not to get too keen, Damien. The project team are on it, but they've got it in a structured order. So now we can see poor old Neo has been set up in parallel to develop 7 screens. So traditionally you've got one person working on a piece of development at once. We've now got 7 versions of the same front-end developer, poor old Neo, working on all of that capability and building out screens for our new code app. And the thing to highlight here is not only are we seeing an example of the squad concept where Neo is the expert in front-end design, but we also have the fleet concept, which allows multiple versions of that same agent to be run in parallel. So we're achieving super efficiency here in terms of build time. Now, slowly but surely, we're going to start to see all of the instances of Neo finish up. So we've got 3 completed so far. That's the 4th and 5th one, so not too far off now from the full build verification that will happen. And now with all 7 screens complete, our agent is going off to do that verification that it's all been done per the agreed plan. So I can see that both Neo and Oracle are doing their final checks in QA testing. And then I have my fingers crossed that we're going to get a first version of this application for us to go and test locally on my browser. But like before, I got quite keen too early, so let's see what happens. So I can see that with the grey text, the thinking of the agent, the build has passed, but there are some warnings, and that might be something that I want to go away and investigate. But at the same time, the agent is working on cleaning up those errors. And it's important to realize that whilst the agent or the squad are building this and testing this and validating problems, I, as a user, still need to go away and test this application end to end to make sure that the navigation between the screen works, to make sure that the scoring works, to make sure that the leaderboard works. Just because we're using AI, just like when you summarize a document, this is generative AI that's driving this. So you do need to validate and you do need to test. So don't think this is build it, done, go publish, make it live. There is still work involved in this process beyond what I'm demonstrating. So we're getting a summary now of what's happened. All the seed data has been created, albeit we know it's not been imported. And then we've got some various screens created. The next phase is to connect Dataverse, seed the data, and deploy to the Power Platform. So phase 2 is done. I'm just wondering, actually, I would like to see if we're able to see the application. So I'm going to ask the question, before we move on to the next phase, I would really like to see what the user interface looks like. Is it possible to run it locally? Is now a good time to reset the conversation? Tell me the sort of prompt I need to use in order to kick off the phase 3. Help me, basically. Let's just correct that as well. I don't want it to help me. I'd like it to help me. So of course I'm doing this all via my microphone. I am using my keyboard once in a while just to hit the enter key. But we want to run the app locally, know if it's a good time to reset the conversation, and get a prompt to go into phase 3. So let's see what happens here. So I think it looks like we're about to get a version of the application launch locally in my browser. There we go. I've got an endpoint. Is now a good time to reset? Yes. And in order to kick off phase 3, I've been given a prompt. So what are the options here? Have a browse around the UI first. It should load with topics and you can click through the stages and then let me know what you think. Okay, so we have a URL. If I click on that, it's going to open up the browser. Oh, wow, we've got our first version of the app. We have a topic here for Power Apps Basic, and we have some different stages I can see. Getting started with Canvas apps, and Canvas apps allow you to design the user interface by dragging and dropping. I have a timer on the top there that's slowly running out of time, but I would say that's true and correct. Something is a container in a Power Platform that stores apps flows and data. Oh dear me. A screen? Let's try it. Incorrect. Well, if anyone knows the answer, do let me know, and maybe we can improve the user interface there so it's a drop down with potential options. Model driven apps require you to manual position every control on the screen. False. There we go. And what formula language is used in Power Apps? I know it's PowerFX. Oh, I got that wrong. We'll have to look at that at some point. And then which tool is used to design and build Canvas apps? It's certainly not Visual Studio Code, albeit I am building now apps using Visual Studio. It's the Power Apps Studio. Something's going wrong there. I can see some of those answers are being marked as incorrect. So we have a bug, and I could describe that to our agent, but I'd like to keep pushing forward with the next phase. So if I go to the leaderboard, I can see some examples of the people on the leaderboard. And if I was wanting to browse, what would I do? Go to continue learning. Now, there are definitely things on here that I could improve upon, like extra navigation, so I can get out of this phase if I've had enough with what's happening. But we have an app at least. So I'm going to say I've noticed a bug. I'm going to say that we're lacking the ability to jump out of challenges if I don't want to complete them. And what I might actually do right now, before I move on to the phase 3, is to ask the agent to capture these small things in the later phases as improvements. And then at least I know they're documented and they can be picked up. So I've tested the user interface very quickly. There's a couple of things that I've noticed that I'd like you to add into a backlog. The first thing is if you go and try a challenge, then unfortunately you cannot navigate away from that challenge until you've completed all the questions. There might be times where I don't want to complete all those questions and return to them at another date. So it would be nice to be able to exit out of those and do exactly that. Another thing I've noticed, it looks like a bug, but some of the answers that I'm sure are correct are showing as incorrect. So I don't know if that's because we're using test data or if I've been stupid and chosen the wrong answer. But I would like you to look at that also. And then finally, the questions that I'm seeing with regards to fill in the blank, that's very difficult for a user to know exactly what word to put in there. So I wonder if we can have it so that we have a drop down with a multiple choice of words. And of course, they choose the correct word, of which maybe 3 of them are incorrect, enabling them to get the answer. But otherwise, good start. So add that into the backlog, and I'm going to reset our conversation after you've finished, and then I'll kick you off with phase 3. So I'll let my agent just consume that information. It'll need to go and write some documentation for us so it can add it into our backlog, and then I'll do exactly as I promised. Okay, so our agent is happy. I'm going to copy this crazy long prompt. And I will again do a clear. I can check that the context is reset like so. I can paste in that prompt and let's begin phase 3. So as before, we can see the agent just thinking through what I've just pasted in as a prompt there. There are some challenges. Those backlog items which have been captured. It's going to have a look at those. And then our main agent, our master agent, has that thorough picture and is now going to create the plan to enable our sub-agents to get cracking within our squad. So there's our agent plan. It's going to fix those errors, going to seed the data, connect and build, and then deploy it. So we should hopefully by the end of this have a version of our app in Power Apps. So as before, I can use the navigation at the bottom here. If there's anything else I want to add or to change or discuss, I can do so here using my microphone, but I'm going to accept the plan and build and get the fleet going with all of my agents building out phase 3 and getting the data loaded. I find it also fascinating to see the plan. Look, there's some overlapping context, so it's going to investigate and then implement carefully so they don't make changes and affect each other's development. And we found the answer validation bug. So there we go. Human and agent work together. I've described the bug. The agent has gone away and had a look. And this emphasizes the point I made earlier. It's very important to do your testing, but again, use the agent to help you. So once you've found something that's wrong, you can also provide screenshots. You can use dev tools within your browser and then provide this additional context to your agent so that it can solve the problems and make your app work as expected. So as we watch the thought process and the complexity of this particular task due to file overlaps, it's going to create some sequential tasks rather than parallel tasks so they don't overwrite each other's work. Now I can see because I asked the agent to put in data with a drop-down for those missing blank answers, it's actually going to have to create some new data because of course originally it was just based on the exact string, whereas now it's going to be based on the ability to drop down and choose the right answer. So it's going to have to create some more answer options before it does that seeding of data in our Dataverse table. Now, remember, just because I'm using AI at this point to generate the answers through my command line interface doesn't mean that that's how you'll implement your questions and answers for your app. You will have a Dataverse or a SQL or a SharePoint list, and you can connect your app to that data source. And then if you want to use a separate application to populate that data, to construct answers, if you want to use AI, if you want to use an agent in Copilot Studio, you have that flexibility. The underlying data that's used for this application is structured in a way that you can populate it with your information. So our agent has now fixed the backlog items, and we'll now begin to seed the data using the MCP server, which is why understanding concepts like MCP is very important. It doesn't only apply to Copilot Studio. Remember, it's that toolbox for bringing in those APIs into your different agent-based systems, one of them being Copilot Studio. So our agent is now going through the process of authenticating and getting our MCP up and running, which will give it access to all the different tools. It's then going to verify the existing table structure and then dispatch parallel agents for seeding our data. So it's very interesting to watch now the agent looking at the schema that's actually deployed to Dataverse and validate it against its understanding. And we can see already there's a potential mismatch with the schema for flashcards and the app. But it's also considering the order in which the data should be loaded, because of course there'll be dependencies between the data. Now at this point I'm observing that it's possibly using the web API rather than the MCP, which is not what I asked in the original plan. So in fact, let me just ask that question. I'll make sure it's in plan mode using Shift and Tab. I just wanted to ask a question. I had noticed that you were querying the web API, but the Dataverse MCP should surely be able to give you the answers that you're looking for. Is there any reason why you were using the API to look at the Dataverse schema? It's just an observation. I don't want you to necessarily make any changes. So this will go into a pending queue again, and eventually that agent will pick this up and consider it. It does look like it was going to use the MCP for doing the seeding. It is agreeing with me. Oh, but it says some of the tools aren't exposed as callable functions. So maybe that's something that I've done wrong or we've done wrong when we set up the MCP. That's fine. Maybe it's something we explore another time. Please just continue with the plan. So there we go. The agents are still running in the background, putting data into our Dataverse tables using MCP. I had obviously observed correctly, but it's maybe something I need to go back to at a later date to understand why the MCP tools are not available for this current session. So we can see that our agent is connected successfully to Dataverse and is currently populating those records. It takes time. And if I refresh our Power Apps table, we can now see that we have some of those questions loaded. Let's go and have a look and see what additional columns we've got. So we've got base points, challenge question. Let me remove the created on and challenge question name. We've got the explanation, the level, the question type, question text. If I save that as a view, we can have a look at some of that generated data there. So we can see the types of questions, the true, false, the multiple choice, the fill in the blank, the questions themselves, and the levels as well. So if we maybe explore the full table, we can see those 3 different levels of basic, medium, advanced. And that's what will allow us to scale this application, knowing that the underlying data is in Dataverse and that the app is basically built based on these questions that we generate. So the agent's kind of reflecting right now about the data logic that's being created and doing some verification to make sure that everything ties up within the logic of the application. It's got me thinking too, to be honest, whether or not when I'm planning, should I go through a phase of development work and planning specifically for the underlying data, and then maybe a phase of planning for the user interface and design of that, rather than trying to do it as one massive plan. But you only learn by doing with these things. And if I'm honest, I'm also a bit disappointed with the speed that the data is loading into Dataverse, because I have done this in the past, and when using the MCP server, it was very, very fast. But I think because I am doing it with the API, there's possibly throttling involved, and that is making us wait an awful long time here. So with hindsight, maybe I should have tested the MCP before kicking this off, but I really wanted to show how we build with this framework and with the GitHub CLI. So if we just give our agent a bit more time to seed that data, and then the final step is deploy our app, and we'll be able to see it as a code app within Power Apps for the first time. So just something else to point out whilst this is running, I've noticed it's come up with compacting conversation history. That's normally when alarm bells start to ring. It means that we've hit the context window or very close to it. So it has done a compaction of that context window to make some space. And that's generally where you want to start thinking about, are we near the end of our conversation? Because if you continue to go, your agent is more likely to start hallucinating over time. So bear that in mind if you see that message. But I know that our agent is getting very close to finishing this current plan. And then we'll have a version, hopefully, deployed onto Power Apps. And if I jump across into apps, I can see that I have a Learn with Code apps that was just deployed 1 minute ago. Do I dare press the play button? So here's our app running. It's in Power Apps. We have the Power Apps basic questions. And I can get started with Canvas apps, with our flashcards, which are not exactly what I wanted, but it's a start. So I think what I'm going to do here is capture the fact we've got a bug with our flashcards. Hey, I've noticed there's a problem with the flashcards. They start with a description, and if I flip them, there's no text. So something's wrong. It should start with the text, and then you flip them and see the description. And then as you move on to next, it should show you again the text, and you flip them to see the description. I'll send that to the agent, and we'll continue exploring our Power App. And I can move on to a challenge. So again, Canvas apps allow you to design the user interface by dragging and dropping. True. We got an error. A something is a container that stores apps, flows, and data, an environment. That is the correct answer. So we still have a bug there. Which tool is used to design and build Canvas apps? The Power App Studio. Which language is used? And something else I'm noticing here is that all the correct answers are the first answers. It's saying it's incorrect. Model-driven apps require you to manually position every control. False. Incorrect. And if I exit out of this, I'm still getting the encouragement here, but there's clearly something wrong with the data that's been loaded. So let's go back to the stages, and I'll mention those errors as well. I've noticed in my testing within Power Apps, I went through one of the tests, and first of all, every answer in the multiple choice is always having the correct answer as the first answer. That needs to be shuffled up so that the first answer isn't always the correct answer. But equally, when I know I've selected the correct answer, I'm then being told it's the incorrect answer. And also, when I have fill in the blank, I was going to tell you to add in a drop down, but actually ignore that. Let's just keep it as it is. But really, I want those other items addressed. So I'll send off my findings to the agent and the squad. Arguably, I should have maybe reset the context at this point. But these are new items. You can see that it's now summarizing what I have specified so that they can understand the context to the application we've built. Now, whilst this is happening, I'm just wondering if I could load up another GitHub Copilot CLI interface. So I'm going to go and navigate to my folder where I do all my projects and into that same folder as before, Learn with Code Apps. And if I load up GitHub Copilot, what I'm hoping to do is ask it to generate some data for our application. Maybe a new theme of questions related to Power Automate, so that this time I can use the MCP server. Hi there, I've built an application using Code Apps. I have a Dataverse schema. I want to create a new category of questions and answers for the low, medium, high level of complexity. The particular topic that I want questions to be covered on is Power Automate Cloud Flows. So I'd like you to use Microsoft Learn, the MCP, in order to find and make up some questions and answers for that subject. And then I'd like you to use the Dataverse MCP to populate those tables using the schema for this application so that we can get those loaded directly into the application and I can start using them immediately. So I'm tasking another instance of GitHub Copilot to go and do some research into the schema that I already have and then use Microsoft Learn, do some research, create some questions and answers, and then populate the Dataverse tables. Now I should have said as well, can you make sure that you use the Dataverse MCP to load the data? Oh, it looks like actually it's going down that route now, the describe table. I've not even sent that message across. So it's doing that search. I've also noticed my dictation says Dataverse. I'll edit that. And I'll send that anyway. But we might get lucky here and it might go down the route of using, it is indeed, it is looking at using the Dataverse MCP. Now, I'm getting a lot of questions about, can I use this, can I use this, can I use this? And you remember earlier on, I used YOLO for you only live once. If I go and enable YOLO, that means that all permissions are now enabled and it can do those tool calls and call the MCP and load that data for me. Now, meanwhile, I can see back on the original terminal, we have a plan here to fix the bugs. And let's go and accept that and build it. So hopefully it will fix our Canvas app, or our code app, sorry, in parallel. And then over on our other terminal window, it will be creating some records in Dataverse for us using the Microsoft Learn materials and the Dataverse MCP. So if I jump across into my app right now, you can see I have a Power Automate Cloud Flow section. So it's actually going through and creating those stages right now. At the moment, it shows that the app has only got 0 of 0 stages. But if I maybe do a refresh of the application, we've now got 9 stages within Power Automate of questions. That gives us 18 stages. So because we've created that Dataverse schema and our table is connected to that schema, you can see how easily I can load data. Okay, I'm using GitHub Copilot here, but like I mentioned, you can load data in as you please. Now it also looks like our agent is happy that it's fixed the errors that I identified. We'll refresh the code app. So it looks like our agent has fixed those bugs. If I go into Power Apps Basics, again, this is something I've maybe changed as well. The logic of this flow is not ideal. Same sort of screen twice. But if we get started with Canvas apps, still getting the description first. Do I need to do a forced refresh? Let's have a look. The correct answer is always first. So the answer was always on top, fixed by adding a shuffle. The correct answer is marked as incorrect. Fix that. Oh, I can see that actually it's not fixed the flashcards. Can you also go ahead and fix the flashcard problem? You can see it's got the earlier context. I'll just let it have a think about this, and once it's planned and I've set it off, I'll go and test the correct answers. So it looks like the agent was a bit naughty here because it went and made changes without consulting with my squad. But it has deployed a fix. And if we go back into our app and try our flashcards, we can see we now have the keyword for Canvas app and the fact it's a type of Power App. A model-driven app, a type of Power App for data models that's driven by tables, views, and forms. Power App Studio, which is where you build out your apps. So our cards are now working. If I start the challenge and load the question, I would say that an environment is where you store it, and that's the correct answer, and it's also not the first answer. A Canvas app allows you to design the user interface by dragging. True. Why is that wrong? A tool is used to design and build Canvas apps. It is the Power App Studio, the correct answer. Which language is used for Power Apps Canvas apps? PowerFX. True. And model-driven apps require you to manually position every control. False, but incorrect. So I can see that we have an issue. Hi there, I've noticed we've also got an issue with the true-false type questions. Despite picking the right answer, I seem to always get the wrong answer. So can you just validate the true-false type questions? And this is, again, an example of how you build with agents. You go through that evaluation process, and that applies really to building agents in Copilot Studio or building with agents in GitHub Copilot. The human is still very much an important part of that process, and you go through this cycle of build, test, deploy, and then back into evaluating and building and testing and deploying. It just so happens that rather than me discussing it with my development team right now, I'm discussing it with my agent. So while we're waiting for that fix, I noticed that on the Create Power Automate terminal, various questions have been created. And if I go and test out my Power Automate Cloud Flows section and have a look at my introduction, there are no flashcards available, despite it saying there are 30 flashcards. So let me copy that message and just say, I've noticed that despite you loading the flashcards into Dataverse, that I'm getting an error message, which I'll provide you with. Is there potentially an issue with the way that you've loaded the data? can you go and validate any documentation about how you should structure that data and maybe make some changes so that it works within our app. So I'll paste in the error message. And I would say, again, probably my fault. I should get the agent to fully document the structure and the shape and the field types. Imagine a user trying to decipher this. If you just asked them to create some records in the table and didn't give them any context, then it's going to be quite difficult. There's obviously some level of complexity in the data structure, and I haven't quite got it right, or the agent hasn't got it quite right. I can talk to it. I can get it to check the schema and make sure that it's valid and the data that's been entered is correct. But it would make sense going forward to document it and actually use the agent to document it, so that when you come back into a conversation in the future, your agent can simply look at that document and know how to populate it. So it looks like the final bug that I'd highlighted, the fact that the true false isn't working, has now been resolved. I can go through those flip cards again. I can start the challenge. Model-driven apps don't manually position. Canvas apps are based on drag and drop. PowerFX is used in Canvas apps. An environment is used for Power Platform container, and Power App Studio is used. And what the score this time? 725 points. So back over on our other terminal, I can see that our agent has found the issue with the naming convention in order to link them up. Again, my bad. I probably should have got the agent to document it, the first agent, so that the new agent can understand how to create those records. But it's using MCP, updating those records. You can see how quick MCP is versus the API calls that were done earlier. And just like that, our flashcards are updated. We have the cards for cloud flows, for triggers, for actions, and if I start the challenge, same problem as before. I'm going to set off my agent and let them fix it. But what I'll do is I'll package this up, I'll put it in a repo, and I'll make it available for folk to download, experiment with. Remember, this isn't a production-ready application, but it's really to demonstrate how you can use AI, GitHub Copilot CLI, your microphone, and very little keyboard touch to build modern applications in Power Apps using Code Apps. Is there anything else to say? There we go. Let me know in the comments what you think about this demonstration. Have you tried it? If you extend this application or build your own, leave a link in the comments. And thanks very much for watching. This took 2.5 hours to build. I'll compress the video, remove the silence. But there you go.